Okay, hello everyone, welcome to today's episode. Today's episode is interestingly focused on the idea of religion to some degree, and also it's a sort of indirect, not tribute, but per se, I'm just bringing it up that Freud, in some sense, the psychologist, one of the early grandfathers of psychology, you can say, he wrote this book called The Future of an Illusion. And I actually first heard of this book from Freud, not from Carl Jung's work, but from, in some sense, Christopher Hitchens debating on stage in a YouTube video. And people ask them, Christopher Hitchens is this militant atheist and he's going around, destroying these fundamentalist perspectives. And what Christopher Hitchens says is very interesting, that he says as long as human beings, that in some sense Freud writes, as long as human beings have a fear of death, they are prone to believing what they don't know yet. It's kind of like whether Freud knew it or not, he was talking about some sort of simulation. In this work of Freud, and Sigmund Freud, guys, this was written in 1927. He makes three claims, three important points, which are notable for a person to know. Excuse me. He says religious ideas are kind of passed down in three ways. This is Freud's view in The Future of an Illusion. He says, firstly, because our primal ancestors believed them, already believed them. That means you opened your eyes, everybody was already believing something before you even could believe, and so that there was a sort of context to your belief before you were born, in some sense. He says secondly, Freud says secondly, because we possess proofs which have been handed down to us from antiquity. That means what's interesting, and I personally, I consider myself, having lived through a theocratical society and also in a very secular society, I found myself walking different states of mind and reality. But anyways, so Freud is saying, because our ancestors believed them, because we had proofs of miracles, revelation, divine, like objects or buildings or whatnot. And then he says thirdly, because it is forbidden to raise the question of their authenticity at all. You see, guys, it's kind of hilarious. There is a strange common bond with, you can say, the secular-minded, and not the religious, but the spiritual-minded. Because when you go to a religious institution or whatever, like a mosque, temple, church, or whatever, the monotheistic tradition specifically, when you go and ask them, what is the soul? What did God say about the soul in this book and in that book and in that book? For me, I feel God was this inner event that we were evolutionarily set for to going through. I honestly think it was an inner event. I feel that the world was multidimensional. There was something else happening in other dimensions, That means reality becomes a much more difficult thing to kind of wonder about when you consider its multiplicity and multidimensionality. Anyways, so when Freud says, because it is forbidden to raise the question, I went and asked, I asked this priest what the soul is, I asked what this mullah, this fakir, in some sense, what the meaning of God is, and when I asked through an Islamic context, the answer was that it's a secret of God, In some sense, for example, in the Christian mindset, the soul is still a secret of God. It's the Holy Spirit, that means there's an unknown factor to it. But there is at least a deviation from the difference between certain monotheistic traditions. Because, for example, Christianity, they believe God, in some sense, was Christ. Now, in Islam, they feel God was not the messenger was the messenger. And then in Indian and polytheistic traditions, they believe everything is God, you know? So it's kind of hilarious, you know? It's different modes of mind. So anyways, I'm saying that from a monotheistic context, okay, it is as if you can't. The soul is the mystery. It's the mystery of what's moving everything in some sense. That's the response you kind of get. Now there are certain sayings, for example, like for example, they've uh, at least I know about, because I'm Persian. I know about, like, for example, the prophet of Islam was asked about the soul, and he said, "What you know is like a drop. It's like less than a drop." That means there are activities occurring. So think of it this way. If you were religious, you would think pretty much everything's God's will, correct? So if everything's God's will, certain things of this God's will are comprehensible, certain amounts of it are not. Do you know? And guys, keep in mind, usually I, of course, say entertain ideas. Don't. You know, a person doesn't have to accept everything they hear. By the way, I'm just letting this. You know, Aristotle said this. It's a sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. In these talks, I'm trying to entertain all those potential parallel realities that, in some sense, could have been accessible as view. So, for example, Freud is saying religion is like this illusion that is abstract, and its validity is self-induced in some sense. But the issue is, even though a person may think of the concept God, you, at the end of the day, are having a relationship with how your mind generates subjects. Do you see what I mean? So, for example, Freud is defining religion as an illusion, where he's saying it consists of certain dogmas, assertions about facts and conditions of external and internal reality, which tells one something that one has not oneself discovered, and which claim that one should give them credence. Let me tell you the thing, guys. Here's the interesting thing. Freud is saying that it's assertions about facts and conditions of external and internal reality. But tell me what in this life is not an assertion? What in the subjective realm is not an assertion? Do you know what I mean? That means it's like we're forgetting the fact that we're like a chemical, and the world is a chemical, and the self and the world are going through this chemical reaction that both of them are being transformed. The world is no longer the same world once the human being walks on it, and the human being is no longer the same human being once he walks on it. So that's the thing, right? I'm starting to notice that it's pretty much like we're just getting better signal. It's like humanity from history is stepping out of the basement where the phone doesn't have signal. And we're slowly coming out, and we're realizing that the signal is being generated by us. So in other words, I want to say, like, people have considered, of course, dogmas. Like, you know what that means? That means before you've looked at something for yourself, something else is telling you what to look at. But the greatest trust and journey and evolution of the life force, like, you gotta kind of take it in as if, like, it's like evolution is strangely accessing deeper dimensions of life. I can't see it being anything other than that. For me, there is a sort of complexity, or Terence McKenna spoke about it as if it's the crystallization of matter. I got the biggest clue, guys, to world peace, to an advanced civilization, how we can make it happen. And the clue was that when you give a young child, a really young child, before the child is even individually conscious as an individual, you give it a toy, it's happy, la, it's laughing, and then the moment you take away the toy, the child cries like no, and then you give the toy back, the child is happy. So I'm realizing it is true. We have to physically, as energetic beings, direct this energy towards engagement with an advanced civilization. On some level, we have to build the body of an advanced civilization, but from another level, it's like we have to already be in the mind of an advanced civilization. I don't know how to say this, but like, pretty much people have opened their eyes and they're like, either this is nonsense or these are my senses. It's either nonsense or senses, guys. You either, like the ancient yogis, open their eyes and they're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this place is a simulation, and then they close their eyes. That's hilarious. That's hilarious, guys. Imagine, like, there's this guru back in the day. I'm kind of animating the story here playfully, but imagine there's a guru, okay? And this guru, the student comes up to her, and the student's like, Guru, tell me, what is the secret? I don't have enough time, tell me. And the guru's like, shut up, man! And the disciple's like, yo, this guru's rude, this is ridiculous, But then, after constantly asking and getting the same response, suddenly the guy's like, maybe the answer is not in speech. Maybe the answer, maybe what your life needs is not a concept, it is not even an object per se, it is a remembrance or an awareness or some way of finding the moment to be a mirror of what you are, In my inner realms, I have moved with greater freedom than my outer realms. What does that mean? That means, for example, I remember I was sitting on this stadium of, not stadium, but like just, I remember it was during my high school days in Toronto, and I was like, I was pretty much a striker on the soccer team, but I could only be like a next level player for only like 20-30 minutes. I had a sort of asthma issue, sport asthma issue. And I remember after that 20 minutes, I would sit down, but I was so excited to play that in my mind, I was following the ball. That's something you notice, I think, about really great soccer players. They know where the ball is, even if they don't see it in front of their eyes. Like, there is that, So I would remember I was sitting in the stands, and in my mind, I could see if I had the ball what I would do while I was watching somebody play on the field. So I'm telling you, the mind gives you way more access to movement, but in a subtle way. So that means if you want to move your body, unless we create anti-gravity technology, imagine like back in the day, you got this really nice place and you've brought your friends and you're like, yo friends, check out this room, and the friends are like, oh my god, what is this room, and then you tell those friends this is the anti-gravity room, and then you and all your friends are just hovering in the air in that room. You know what I mean? That's definitely going to happen in the future, guys. We're going to have anti-gravity rooms. Whoever makes this, like, I don't know, feel free to give me a shout out. Right now, as I'm speaking to you even, the activity of speech, the inner realms have to move faster than the outer realms. Anytime you see me, for example, pausing, I mean, sometimes I'm just catching my breath, but like, sometimes when you guys hear me pause, it is literally because the inner realm has either sped up more than usual or is slowing down. That means anytime I stop caring for what I'm doing, my intelligence is separated from it. That means you might not understand, but if you pay attention, what you care about, your actual intelligence applies. What you don't care about, but you still have to do, you kind of just want to get through so you actually get to a moment where you can do what you actually want. So I feel it's not just survival of the fittest anymore. It is survival of the most efficient journey while you're here. That's it. That means if all the governments in the world were like, whoa, human beings are tourists in existence. They are tourists in existence. And so the whole action, if I don't know what the hell like the governments of the world are doing, but I think in the future governments are just going to be resource stations. Because people would eventually reach a point where, just like how, imagine when you're young and, for example, a certain thing is intimidating to you, you get older, it's not intimidating. It's not just that the world is evolving, your eyes are also driving while the cosmos is driving the world, you know? And there's a reason I'm giving these podcasts to the human species, guys. I feel the human species is like that. Let me tell you what's happened. This is what the cosmos is like, guys. It's like an airplane, and suddenly they're like, the pilot can't pilot anymore. The pilot is gone. Somehow the pilot is missing. Nobody knows where the pilot of this airplane is. And then suddenly they're coming out and they're like, who knows how to fly? Who knows how to fly? And let's say the co-pilot wasn't there too. So then, suddenly it's like the human species, the most sophisticated, the most furthest stepping species. You know, that means when an extraterrestrial comes and speaks to us on this earth, that extraterrestrial is not contacting human beings. It's contacting the earth. Do you know what I mean? That means we are representing all the animals, insects, plants, and institutions, and everything. Everything on this planet, because our eyes are open as a species, as the most advanced species, we are the one who, when they ask, there's no pilot who's going to pilot, the human species has accepted that role. That means you might not realize it, but your species has, in some sense, been designed to surpass its world. That means, how can I say my sense of self has evolved if I'm in the same world? It's like when you look at the bodhisattvas in Tibetan Buddhism, the archetype of like a collectively conscious being, in some sense coming into an individual conscious reality. It's like the Buddha, when it was climbing the mountain up, the bodhisattva was climbing the mountain down. The Buddha was going towards oneness, the bodhisattva had been there, done that. You know? Here's the thing, guys. People are looking for static truths of happiness, and life is not a portrait, it's a film. When you realize that, it'll blow your mind and you'll see why ideological belief is the limitation. That means language is paint. That means on some level, like that theist and atheist debating, they're both drawing pictures. You know, they're just drawing pictures with words. Like an orator is like someone who can, in some sense, not only draw upon conceptually different ideologies, but in some sense draw those ideologies. You know? That means most people, they are waiting for instructions, then they want to act. They're waiting for a savior, then they want to act. They're waiting for something, and then they want to act. They're constantly waiting for something outside of them to change them, not realizing your view on the outside is from inside of you. You know? This is why I was like, our species will have so much more conflicts unless it can discriminate between what is the inner realm and the outer realm. This gets rid of a lot of things. Let me tell you what I mean. Let's say, for example, person A is in the park, and person B is in the park, and person A and person B, they're very important people. Okay, and they're discussing and they're debating. Let's say they're like world leaders arguing. Okay, person A, world leader A, and world leader B, they're arguing. Okay? Now, world leader A has to realize that it's as if, sure, you're a leader of your nation, but you're also your nation is also the part of the earth. You know what I mean? I'm simply saying, guys, that person A has access to an outer realm and an inner realm, and person B has access to inner realm B and outer realm B. Person B's outer realm. Now, outer realm is common. That means in front of my eyes and in front of your eyes, there is enough stability for two people to sit down and play chess, for example, okay? Like, do you see? It's a common reality. The conditions in front of our eyes change less and slower than the conditions of subjective circumstance behind our eyes. That means the mind is living a faster life while the body is living the life. That faster life, it's so faster that it has kept the speed of lesser dimensions still to itself. That means it's like you think like there's 3 dimensions, you think there's only 4 dimensions, and then you're like, wait a minute, something is happening in the 4th dimension, and then you kind of get a sense, all right, this is happening from the 5th dimension. But then you see this potential thing that the 5th dimension could be doing to the 4th dimension is so unimaginable that it's either an interruption and interference also with higher dimensions, or it is in some sense that we can never see the reverse. That means if I wanted to see, it's like when you look at the good, you notice the bad. When you look at the bad, you notice the good. It's like, you gotta be honest, like, the Joker was a huge part of Batman's PR, That means what made Batman fascinating, it was because there was a chaotic condition that needed some sort of archetype to respond to it. I can tell you, a person can sit still, or let me finish that example. I was saying person A and person B, world leader A, world leader B. World leader A comes and says, I think the world should be like this. World leader B comes and says, I think the world should be like this, and they're kind of at it, And then suddenly world leader C comes and says, guys, world leader A and world leader B, they have to come into an agreement, into an acceptance of a common world, or they are living in their own worlds. Do you see? That means what most people fear in social scenarios is actually an inbuilt thing. It is the feeling of exile. It is the feeling of banishment. That means I could tell you that in some people, maybe strangely, it's like a blessing in disguise, but sometimes when something pushes you, you suddenly become aware, you get a sharpened awareness to what is pulling you. So guys, just to add a bit more, in The Future of an Illusion, Freud also says fulfillments of the oldest, strongest, and most urgent wishes of mankind. That our psychology is not just because of what is real and true, it's also because of what we want there. How fascinating. But you see, the issue with this writing of Freud is that he has not clarified how his subjective projection as a human being in reality is not an illusion. On some level, it's like, somebody telling you the store is closed, then the person walking in the store and buying something. I've never experienced this, but probably somebody has. Yeah. Guys, Freud, however, as I'm reading further, he does say that not all illusions, he says illusions need not necessarily be false. And he gives a cultural example, more of a social example, and he says a middle class girl a middle, it's like he says, and he gives the example of a middle class girl having this illusion that a prince will marry her. Do you know? So I don't know, maybe maybe they were digging gold differently back in the day too. I don't know. But it's so he's saying that there is the possibility, there is the potential. I think really what it is Carl Jung surpassed Freud's ideology with his notion of archetypes. With the notion of archetypes, Carl Jung gave a KO, like a knockout, Mortal Kombat fatality kick kind of response to Freud, and he said there is an unconscious. For me, the genius of Carl Jung, where people think is like of course people appreciate a lot of his work, but his genius, I think, was how he somehow managed to secularize the term unconscious. That means it's like when you speak about mystery and other dimensions, the secular-minded person's like, oh, what are you talking about, man? But when you suddenly speak about the unconscious, then the attention arises. Why? Because we're all conditioned to engage the world in different ways. We are in the same world. It's like a video game, you know? The characters it's a multiplayer online video game where it's like 8 billion characters on a rock in the middle of nowhere. Okay, that's the video game. Now, we are wondering if this character is not just the character, and for example, when there's deep sleep, like the video gamer has in some sense gone for a break or something. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like realizing that I honestly feel that there's going to be gaming religions in the future. That means the gaming pattern, like let me tell you what it is. It's like history is like a box office chart, built like a Billboard box office chart where they're showing you the best music, the ones on top of the list, the most popular. So similarly, it's the same thing going on with all ideologies. And so right now, if there was an advanced extraterrestrial civilization, playfully, they would probably have an ability to instantly measure how many thoughts of the same kind are on the planet. They would literally look at us and they would notice by what we're looking, by what we're walking towards, we're revealing our mind. You can't live in a lie because before the lie, there was no lie. And this is a philosophical kind of view where you reach the point where it's like you're denying. Imagine somebody says something, you're like, no, that's not true. No, that's not true. And then you realize infinitely you can say the valid statement of I don't know. Because pretty much it's not about the words per se. It's not about the concepts. It's about these eyes that are seeing something and what this sight and engagement of moment is. It surpasses ideology. You can only live a scholar for so long until the truth roars in front of your face. And what the truth is that there's a deeper experiential reality that goes beyond the language threshold. It's not conceptual. We are pretty much the whole moment. Right now we're identifying with a part of our moment. I'm saying I'm just my biological body. You know, I'm saying I'm a subjective content of the moment. I'm this idea. You know, I'm this person, that person. But I'm saying these are all different attention, hyper-zooming on a part of the content of the moment. When you reach a point where your moment can just be there, it's like hanging out just like people. It's not that difficult. It's like the same way people hang around with other people. You're like a plant in the garden and they're a plant in the garden. You know? It's like the expressions are happening all the time. If we could, I say personally, Mr. Within says, geometry is the next great language of all languages. So I feel that means one day in the future that we're going to open our eyes either to advanced technology or an advancement in our inner technologies, inner realms, and we're going to look at the world and we're going to see it all as geometry. And we're gonna see every word. Imagine you go get a coffee outside. Whatever the person says, you no longer hear sounds. You just see geometry. And then you suddenly realize everything has some design set in motion. So it's as if you have opened your eyes in a world where every moment, like a billiard ball, there is life being rolled into this world. Who knows? Our eyes could totally be different than what the mirror of this dimension reveals to us. Every dimension has its own mirror, by the way. And a person can get drawn to a mirror if they are not cautious of their inner realms. So this is, I'm going to say this because, like, I was thinking in the future if I had daughters, like, this would probably be something good to say. Where I was thinking, like, you see, it's like the value of selfhood in a changing world. The value of selfhood in a changing world. That means you're alive once. Every moment you have an allowance to be a new activity. To really share my honest view on just the concept of the future of an illusion, there was a time where I was afraid of the illusion. And I was afraid of it in two ways. I was afraid that externally I was in an illusion, like everybody was a sheep going to some slaughterhouse. And then I had this fear where internally I was a sheep, as if like I was a fool of my own being. I didn't know. My own existence was fooling me, was confusing me, was baffling me, as if eyes opened and they could not remember what is here. Do you see? So that's like a nostalgia of the moment where you were the winds of evolution before you were formed. You see, the body has ascended, the mind has descended. That means the soul is trying to climb back towards truth from the illusion, but the body, from out of nowhere, out of emptiness, which was an illusion, suddenly came this truth of form. I feel that what we need is massive dialogue. You see, it's like there's explosions in the news. Turn on the news, after changing a bunch of channels, you'll find some news which is about some explosion, some disaster. You know? And I was like, when am I gonna turn on the news and suddenly be like, for example, by that time, hopefully there's a network where it's as if, like, this is what I think needs to happen, guys. I think a very self-aware global community needs to emerge, and then that global community needs to implement a system where the greatest ideas can come and find the greatest problems. You might not believe it, but genius is not a discovery. It is a journey. Albert Einstein said it's the connection. When you connect two worlds that had no relation to one another, that's a eureka, what the fuck moment. Because it's new. It's like as new of an idea right now. I'll give you an example. For example, you see a squirrel climb a tree, and then you imagine a giant transformer robot climbing a tree, right? Two realms that you did not see in similar contexts. You find a bridge between the contexts, a new idea is born. That means when two ideas with different contexts find the same context, they in some sense give birth to their child a new concept. Oh my God, guys, Freud gets too deep into this, but I'm going to share it. So, guys, this is something I'm reading for you. I thought it was interesting to share. Freud explains religion in a similar term to that of totemism. I gotta see what that. Oh, totemism. Yeah, totemism is like how a beacon of the truth is near you. So Freud explains religion in a similar term to that of totemism. The individual is essentially an enemy of society and has instinctual urges that must be restrained to help society function. And then, this is Freud's exact words. He says, among these instinctual wishes are those of incest, cannibalism, and lust for killing. So, I guess it's kind of clear. I can totally see what Freud's saying. Freud's like looking at human beings and he's like, alright, excuse my language, folks, but he's saying like fucked up shit can happen and efficient, advanced shit can happen. You know? And Freud is looking at this kind of perspective and he's saying that in some sense, the more there is, you take a step towards being an animal, the more the boundaries that you keep, that are keeping you a civilized entity, an organized entity, of collapse. That means something they don't teach about failure is that is that what to do after. For me, guys, it's like this. It's like human beings have no choice. We are designed to be advanced. We are not designed to giggle in ignorance. We're designed to advance. So it's like after some point, an event takes place in the lifetime that is so supreme, that surpasses the inner realms. I can tell you that I have looked through many texts and many ideas, many sort of notions, whether esoteric or philosophical, and it's like when you're beside a waterfall once, take a good look at it. When something is happening of incredible real value, become aware of it. Do you know aware, do you need? Do you know, do you know that the mind has an ability to move without the body moving? And if someone would say, Mr. Within, how does the mind move? And I'm telling you, it moves with attention, and attention moves with what it entertains. So right now, it's like I'm being something before I do anything, and when I become aware of the rhythms of how I'm being, what I do tends to become easier. If I'm not aware of how I'm being before I do something, I suddenly set up this set up this situation where I've started something, but there's other, like, imagine if the person's mind is a program, like, and right now I'm talking to you, imagine. So like an iPhone, it's like one application is speaking to the audience, one application is paying attention to my inner one program app that's open is, for example, just an overall awareness of my, like, where I am. So you see, it's like it's an onion style multidimensionality in regards to how we're tunneling from dimensions. We're tunneling through dimensions. Anybody who's cut an onion ever in their life knows what it means to have tears over nothing. This life is like a phenomenon. The most important thing I realized is that just the person should give freedom Literally give freedom. Give. Go into the mode, go into giving is the driver's seat, taking is the passenger seat of karma. What giving is, though, is there is two types. There's giving when you want something out of it, like a salesman, and then there is giving where it's as if like back in the day there was no currency. We were a tribe of hunter-gatherers. Somebody would find berries and the tribe's technologies and experience would be revolutionized. Really, technology, nature, all of this is just there as a road for the creature. It's like your feet are not the road. That means like a higher dimensional being is journeying through a lower dimensional plane. So a higher dimensional being feels blessed. That means it's like, imagine like a professional footballer playing with high school students. That professional footballer is at a level where he knows, he has a maturity about the game. Really, it's about skill arrives only when you just endure through the battles to see if the victory is even possible. And for example, this it holds true for Tibetan Buddhism and also Vedic mythology. One can say that back in the day, the world was a multidimensional place. So right now, we're all super secular. We're like, all right, it's just atoms. Okay, okay. Don't get angry if we say it's something else. It's just atoms. Okay. It's like sometimes, it's it's like, why do we have eyes if we're only meant to look at things in one way? Huh? Like what? Like I don't understand even the concept of belief in a changing world. The world's changing. What are you believing in? What are you believing in? You as a human being are changing throughout the years as a sense of self. Literally, your physical body is different than 10 years ago. And trust me, your inner ideological constitution is experientially different. That means someone could be a very alert and attentive person like it's all about life sensitivity. I will tell you this. Just ask yourself what is life and go look at it. And after some point, you will see it's not about the ideas. It is about the engagement. How you engage it. How you walk this world while you were something. Because people are waiting, so many people are waiting for themselves. Let me tell you, people are not waiting for they're not waiting for their future success. They're not waiting for a savior. They're waiting for permission. And that permission is not there unless the person is not afraid of what they are. If you're afraid of something, you are choosing not to look at it or run away from it, usually. So it's only when you see the unknown, you see the meaningless, you see the chaotic, you see that which doesn't make sense, you see the illusion, but you keep looking at it. Rather than just denying it or doing it, you endure through the system, the cosmic system your eyes have opened in. What is freedom if it can't be any movement? Mr.Within is kind of saying like, people think the fight for free speech is over. No. Free speech has been made it's a universal right. Like you're like a creature of this world. You're allowed to exist and you're allowed to be. You're allowed to be a creature in this world pretty much. And when the person forgets that because they have some portrait of uh, uh, of an assumption of what the world is. I'm telling you, the world is a process. You're looking for it at first as if it's a picture, as if it's a treasure chest, as if knowledge is that thing you don't have, and when you get it, it's all good. You're going to go realize it's a river. It's a river. Literally, we got to jump in the river and start swimming. You know? We have to realize we are moving beyond, we are evolving beyond individual consciousness, and the way we're evolving beyond individual consciousness is by evolving individual consciousness. Our conscious minds are like our hands in other dimensions. Do you see what I mean? Like, that's the access of it, you know? You know, for me, Freud and Jung, they were like the great, I can say, I'll project the term, great alphabeticians of psychology. You see, all departments in academia, they were set into motion. When you look at a person, let's say even you see a person speak, you will at some point, regardless of how you communicate to them, realize they're just a person seeing the world and continuing to walk in it. That on some level we're just all innocent walkers into the new. For me, if in the moment you see the possibility of an inefficient activity, violence is an inefficient global activity, it's just inefficient. The ancient Greeks had such a noble endeavor, universal endeavor. They would say the task is to tame the savageness of man and make gentler the life of this world. That gentleness the ancient Greeks spoke about, that gentleness is mindfulness, is awareness that you're no longer just an object, that evolution did something weird, it became a subject to itself. How weird is that? Matter became abstraction to itself. Isn't that extremely odd? Are we all just casually being like, yeah, there's reality, but we got imagination. Imagination? You're telling me that reality is divided? It has extensions? There are unknown realms? Do you see what I mean? So, guys, my attention's on the chat section. Please specify exactly what you guys are commenting on. Usually when I speak, I'm not looking at the chat section, so I won't know what you guys are talking about unless you tell me the context. But welcome, everybody. So, John, I don't know what you mean when you say to all different timelines. What do you mean? Uh, Welcome everybody to the chat section. You know, guys, I see it like this, that language, something interesting that okay, here, an interesting way to perceive it. It's like I was kind of curious. I was curious about how language developed because there was a time I was just reacting to the imagery of my inner realms in the sense that I thought I was a certain unique person going and doing something unique. And then I asked myself, before my relationship with my own metaphysics and my inner realms and imagination, what am I having a relationship before I have a relationship with my soul? So this is what I notice. I notice that we think we're having a relationship with body, we're thinking we're having a relationship with mind, but suddenly realizing we're actually having a relationship with accepting the language that is defining the limits. So for me, language became more interesting than spirituality and metaphysics. But when I drove into language, it was as if I was entering the back door. And what I meant by that is that I kind of reverse engineered myself out of conception into a moment where I realized the moment is just the moment. There is a strange chaotic simplicity. That means chaos has a simple side and a complex side. And chaos has, in some sense, what do you call it? Chaos has a simple, let's say, side and ordered side, and the order has a simple side and an ordered side. You see, it's not that there is no ultimate truth. It's just that it's like we're ants that know we are ants. You know? We are on the shoulder of a giant cosmos, and it's moving. And it's kind of like us trying to figure out why the cosmos is moving the way it is. It's like your red blood cell figuring out the red blood cell in your veins, wondering why you're going to work. Like it can't even conceive the dimension. So I suddenly noticed that if you have too much of a desire, and it's like an explorer with a desire, you see it in movies all the time. The explorer with too much of a egoically constructed desire dies. The guy who doesn't want to let go of the gold from the treasure place they found the gold, he dies. You know? So here's the thing, guys, that I wondered about language, and I saw something from two notable. Anybody who's interested in language for me is like the paint. It's like the paint of communication. Okay, so for example, Noam Chomsky and even Steven Pinker. Noam Chomsky is an MIT professor on linguistics. And he's a powerhouse. He's like, we're gonna make statues of him one day. But there is Steven Pinker as well, who is a man with an incredible sophisticated inner realm, and he says that there was meaning before there was language. So you see how I'm speaking to you right now? Guys, this is language. Now, what these what these professors on language are saying, linguistics professors are saying, is that before I had words to communicate, there was something happening. That means the animal like suddenly saw imagine the early tribalhood. You see a tribal member, something dangerous about to happen, you make a grunt. There's no language, but you're like making noise and sound like, yo, be aware, but you have no language. It's just throwing sound like a caveman. Right? So right now, we are at an era where we've gone through such a sophisticated way of evolution where you won't believe what we have the potential of. Back in the day, in ancient times, there was this text that said, in some sense, people would speak in verse. That means there was a linguistic dimension. The mind wasn't synonymous with the self yet. The mind was how the soul of the world was still in the world was still living alongside man. Then when man, in some sense, dishonored himself, he dishonored the world technically, and the world soul left. You know? And if you're really looking, for example, Japanese metaphysics, even Native American shamanism, and even Vedic culture, they have a sort of ceremonial relationship to life. And I was like, what is this? Why are so many people trying to do like combinations of actions and sounds to feel like something's happening? And then I realized it's a permission for their inner realms. That means that person who is in some sense dancing around the fire and like, drinking this rare kind of psychedelic tea back in the day, that person, that ceremony is not for the outer realms. That means the shaman knew, the shaman walked in the inner realms as well, not just the outer realms. Do you see? So guys, my attention is back on the chat section. I'm just reading the chat section, guys. Yeah. Like right now, just think about it. If somebody came and asked you, who are you? And whatever answer you would give them, if they asked that question 10 minutes later, would you have the same answer come to your mind when they ask you that question? You're going to say no. That means we are judging processes. That means it's like such a primitive way to see the human being as just a shape, as just a color. What are we, the pixels on the screen of other people's minds? That means when I saw racism, like the idea of racism, and of course any person who kind of reads about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, you kind of realize that human beings have treated each other in fucked up ways only to evolve into a civility where now they realize before they are the content of their eyes, they are their minds. That means when I look at another person, I can't. There was a time I could look at him and be like, yeah, that person's fucking stupid. Oh, that person's fucking smart. There was a time it was so easy. It was so easy to just throw my own impressions over people's faces. But then there came a time where I noticed that it's unknown. And I can tell you the greatest experience of my life was realizing the unknown is unknown. It's so simple, but it's so ultimate. Do you know? The mind is in motion, and a system in motion can't be taken a snapshot photo, so you can never judge an evolving being technically. You can, of course, make them aware of their blind spots, but you can't judge a human being. You can't define their inner realms. Do you see? We're not clones. Like, if all our heads were plugged into the same computer right now, then I would say, okay, maybe then one person's inner realms could influence everybody's inner realms instantly. I'm just saying this, guys. I'm just saying it's like, imagine you playing a video game or watching TV and suddenly judging the color of a table, the color of a color, judging the pixels on a screen. Do you see? That's what angers me. What angers me is when the inner realms are not tolerant to relive in the outer realms. But we also need an appearance to that haze. So guys, Hayes says something interesting in the chat section. He says, we need each other in our interactions to evolve and become together what we each should be to make up the whole. Yes, we are kind of like different rivers joining and going towards the same ocean, but there is a humanized dimension to this, okay? And the humanized dimension shouldn't be too perverted or deviated from, or perturbed, disturbed. What that means, there is something in nature that you are just an observer of. And then there is something in nature where you are it. You are the mover. So you gotta have the honor. If you could be whoever, I'm telling you, just have and honor your inner realms. That's all Mr. Within is saying. You don't have to believe, disbelieve. It's like you can play any game of language. You can sculpt language in whatever way that suits you. But one day you will realize before those words there were worlds moving. And the witness was the winds of evolution. That means technically right now, I'm a memory in the future. I'm a memory of the future. I have access, when I feel like I'm a memory, I get access to, let's say, a sense of future archetypal uncharted territory. You see, it's all about image. On some level, it's just activity. On some even more deeper existential level, it's just a happening. Something is happening, and we are the added dimension of meaning. That means before human beings, it was just silent stuff, just moving. And then human beings were like the lantern that was like, yo, I could see some stuff. And then human beings saw this vast universe. For me, it's like this. If the world is lifeless, it's okay to be, I don't want to say it's okay, but there is more moral justification for cruelty, But if the world is alive, that means like when a person is alive, like the civilized human being, you see it's as if like everybody has their energy field around them. That energy field is their space before their psychology shifts. That means different people, their relationship with the world is different. But the whole notion is to kind of like advance each other's eyes as long as we're here. Do you know? So I was like, okay, life is about work. If life is about work, then what is the main work? What is the great work? What is the once-in-a-lifetime option work, Guys, on some level, it's like we're all parts of this brain. It's like if the species had a brain, like a field-like attributeless brain, like if the species had access to, like right now, imagine behind your eyes, beyond your beliefs on truths and illusions, there is an access to an ocean of every living being's emotional experience. Emotions are like living a life in our thoughts. The explanation of the world in the inner realms is you are God. In the explanation of the worlds in the outer realms, you didn't create this. So behind your eyes, anything where the light of your free will shines, you feel it is you have access, pretty much. So guys, when I use language, I say language is like, I don't mean just words. Words are not just words. Words are conceptual, they are like images, and some words that become verbs are like films. Okay? So you can say in the same way, let's say a film director looks at an actor and realize the subject in front of the camera can move in different ways, or the setting behind it can move, Similarly, you can say the person is realizing this with the inner realms, that in any moment in life, in any scene of visible reality, you can suddenly evoke a verb. And a verb is change, is when you are abiding with the change. The noun is when you are just trying to get a souvenir from time as your own belief. Pretty much, guys, I'm saying the world has two ways. Either we're going to go towards all of us being like clones or one mind, one digital mind, or we're going to preserve our individuality and just build a multidimensional, build a wonderland of a civilization, but an advanced one. That means it's as if, imagine like this, guys. Imagine, in one of my science fiction writings, I'm going to share with you a story that I designed. The story is pretty much this celestial general, okay? And then there's this general on Earth. And this celestial general, in the dream of this like greatest general in this, like my sci-fi novel has parallel dimensions, so anyways. This general in his dream sees a celestial general, and he in some sense, how can I tell you, the celestial general makes this human being in this parallel dimension of Earth run to humanity and shout to all sectors that we have to prepare for a galactic war. And there's this galactic war occurring where all even primitive civilizations are being ushered to advance like million years ahead of their time to serve this galactic war. You know? As if a sort of recruitment process of primitive civilizations that if you could give them 1,000,000 years of advanced technology, they could be soldiers on your battlefield in a galactic stage. And so I had kind of brought forth this narrative, but it was through the dream of this general with a greater general. And in the dream, he has a dialogue where the general says, "Are you my soul or something? Are you God?" And he says, "No. Do you know I am your general?" Vision is fascinating, guys. Look at life as a dance between chaos and order, and that means a dance between the potential of self and world. The self is on the shoulder of a giant that is the world. Therefore, the self is technically existing as the world, even though it has an option to fly away from it. So guys, check this out. I'm going to read this last thing from Freud, because it talks pretty much, the plane's almost landed. Freud had discovered the true source of religious sentiment, which he ascribed to an, in quotations, oceanic feeling. The psychiatrist Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, wrote that the future of an illusion, in quotations, he says, gives the best possible account of Freud's earlier views, which in quotations Jung is saying, which move within the confines of the outmoded rationalism and scientific materialism of the late 19th century. Oh, he's such a good, Carl Jung is such a G. He's literally just complimenting Freud for being ahead of his time, but he's not complimenting him for his idea. I'm telling you guys, philosophers are playing a chess game that in every generation history, it's like you got to do. It's like the chess move for that moment, you know. The critic Harold Bloom calls the future of illusion, in quotations, one of the greatest failures of religious criticism. Okay, this backlash. Anyways. Guys, it's like this. Let me tell you the easiest way to understand the psychology of religion. This is Mr. Within's view on the psychology of the religion. Imagine you're a person in the 6th century, and what are your options? You're looking at your house, you're looking at your kids, You know, you're speaking to people in your neighborhood. If you want to journey to another town, it's probably a long journey with simple conditions of living. Okay? Now imagine you wonder, who are you? Imagine you're just in the 6th century and you're like, who am I? And you see you're a person and you realize you have parents. So you're like, all right, I was created as a person. So now, how long do you think it should take from a moment that human beings realized they were created by people to look at the world and think, what if this was created by a personality? It was so natural. It was literally like it was an evolutionary stepping stone. It doesn't mean we should still be on that stepping stone. It was an evolutionary stepping stone. That it was just the human being, he's like, all right, I'm a person, you know, I got created. Wait a minute, this is the world, you know, I'm looking at the world. What if the world was created? Whoa, what if the world was created with a person? But what if this was not in the humorous, or in the play, in like the silly way I'm sharing it? Maybe what if this came to a person back in the day through utter intensity? What if you were actually that person? It's like, what? Is life all this? Just maintain this simple house and everything goes away. Life was so hopeless back in the day. It was so hard living back in the day that the concept of heaven and a better place was just pretty much why the future was held in awe. That means something you find in common in secular thought and religious thought. Both of them are looking at the future. Both of them are looking at the future. How cool is that? Religion, the religious man wants to go to heaven, do you know? And the secular man wants to go beyond our clouds. It's like it's all wanting to go somewhere. I feel that Civilization 2.0 is is Mr. Within's strategy to bypass extinction indefinitely. Because we're a technological species, guys. I saw a checkmate when I was playing chess against my the chaos of extinction. You know, guys, the Buddha has this story, and I'm going to share. And welcome to the chat, Michelle. I feel I should share this story, so I'm sharing it out of a respect for the Buddha and the moment. There's this story that this woman, this is a story, an actual story of Buddha, guys. This woman, her child passes away, but she is in such shock she can't believe it. She takes her child to Buddha, who people said he's the awakened one. Buddha means awakened one, like the blessed one or whatever, you know. And so they in some sense ran to Buddha. She ran to Buddha with her passed away child in her arms, and she looks at the Buddha, and the Buddha's there with the whole entourage of disciples or whatever, you know. And what happens? Buddha is silent, and this woman is screaming and saying that, please, Buddha, you perform miracles, bring back my child, you know, make her eyes open. She can't accept that something so important suddenly left her moment. Do you know? So what happens is the Buddha doesn't try to pat her on the back. The Buddha tells her, all right, you know, life has spoken. You know, so what can we do? We can at least listen. You know, and so what that means is the Buddha tells her, I will. She says he entertains the reality. The lady's like, can you bring bring my child back to life? And Buddha's like, yeah, but you have to go to every house and you have to get a mustard seed. And a mustard seed was something very common and easy to get, right? So he's like, you got to go get me a mustard seed. You know, but he's like, you can't get a mustard seed from a house where someone's died in it. Where someone's died in that house. And the lady's like, okay, I'm gonna go get the mustard seed, and she runs. And guys, I had a door-to-door job, so I could totally relate to this experience, you know? She runs door to door knocking. And she says, help me, please. I need to help save my child. And the people in the household are alarmed. They're like, okay, what do we do? How can we help you? And she says, like, I need a mustard seed. And they run and get the mustard seed. And before she takes the mustard seed, she says, has anybody died in your family? And they say yes. And she's like, thanks, I don't need the mustard seed. And those guys go back and they're like, that was the weirdest experience ever. And then she runs to the next house and she says, do you have a mustard seed? And they say yes, and they bring the mustard seed. She says, has anybody died in this family? And they say yes. Every door she goes, they have mustard seeds, but someone has died. Then at the end, she suddenly realizes that it's nature. It is nature. And sometimes nature, it doesn't know how to move, and sometimes it does, So I'm saying that in that moment, she realized that nature has happened. It is like the chaos. Do you know my past is past? All the days that I spent giving these talks, for example, those days have passed. Do you know? And so it's as if like I could totally see how there's an opportunity cost to every decision. But reality is marching towards something. So when you see what the future wants, you don't even care about your present desires that much. Because that's really what the idea, and she goes back to Buddha, and then she becomes a Buddhist or something. Because then she realizes Buddha's plan. Like after her inner realms incident is done, she's like, all right, Buddha, what are you doing now? And Buddha's like, we all now as creatures are entertaining this transmigrating notion of, in some sense, like the soul, and we're trying to get out of suffering. That means Buddha was like, after you've finished the Rubik's cubes of your inner realms of your individual life. Sorry, not your inner realms, your individual life. After you've gotten all your desires, then you'll ask the big questions. Then you'll realize where the front lines are. Then you will run towards it. It's about contentment. Things come and go. Do you know? And I got shocked, guys. I got shocked. I was like, how is it that I care for my physical body, but that tree outside in someone else's yard, even if I want to water it, I can't? Do you know why is it that I inevitably don't care about that? Do you see? And I realized the language we are existing in two worlds at the same time. You gotta let the past be, and that's when you get to see who you could have been in the future. Honor the decision of all beings, even if they're weak. Even if something unfortunate happens, right? Keep the honor alive. What honor means is that our eyes are shouting at each other from their own islands. And that's what histories and scribes have been kind of recording. Do you know, like, if AI, honestly, like, if in the future AI becomes like androids are walking in the city and they're all this one AI, the unknown is the coolest thing ever. I don't know what people, I think that's what, here's the thing. It's like nobody has your eyes. And because nobody has your eyes, nobody can see your problems as a human being. When you realize this is a good thing to realize. And when you realize nobody has your eyes, you're the only one who can see the world having that kind of experiential value. Then you stop. You become an advanced communicator by simply being observant before you move. That means be aware of your being before you do something, you succeed. Don't be aware of your being, you won't succeed. Even Maximus from the movie Gladiator, he would go and rub dirt on his hand before he would fight. Why? Because he was aware where he could return to in an instant. Oh wow. This is incredible. Guys, just for the sake of the chat section, anybody who's writing where they're listening from, write it in capital letters. I think that would be. Here. I'll be the first. I don't know, guys. It's like you gotta, on some level, have the mindfulness to know what you can carry. That means you know how many people pick up stuff that they think they can lift up, and they suddenly see they can't, and that becomes a living experience. And this is something good to know. Anytime a person wants to pick up something, I mean, realistically, if you think about it, the muscles should become very intense. So what does that mean? That means you gotta tighten the muscle that's engaged in any activity before you move, so the muscle doesn't have sudden too much pressure on it. I don't know, guys. It's like we gotta strive towards an advanced civilization. What else can we do? Guys, sorry. I'm just doing something. Okay. Anyways, guys, I'll just open it up to Q&A and pretty much the talk's over. So if anybody has a question or something, you know, they want like the whole community to look more into, everybody who's in the chat section, like, because let me tell you, after some point, there is no such thing as fame. There is no such thing as value. There is no such thing as that in a war, you know? Guys, there is this thing that I'm just going to comment on while people think of questions or during the Q&A. But I don't know, I just want to say that human beings are expressive creatures in their inner realms. So in your inner realms, you're constantly being a new view, but your outer realms, you're the same thing. So the body is a stage for the mind in a strange way. So John says, do you think a war is coming? Let me tell you guys, if from 2020 onwards there is war, that's just, we gotta let those savage, archaic minds programs just end. That means on some level, it's like a person can make a stupid decision at any moment. So asking, in some sense, if there's a war, it means, yeah, human beings may suddenly become stupid. But I think, John, the way we should see the idea of war is that war starts in the minds of men. And if men can communicate, if human beings can communicate to one another, that's the biggest prevention of war. So the biggest prevention of war is, I mean, of course, there is desire and greed, of course, but I'm saying, like, so I would say, walk towards the Pure Lands, and if war happens, it's we let young children hold advanced complex weapons, and then we just bask in shame. If war happens, we will go into shame, and then in the subconscious psyche of the person, like you can say that in the subconscious, the person is going to become the ultimate rebel. So if war happens, it's going to become the epitome of the ego. So when war happens, egos suddenly revolutionize. But if in some sense war doesn't happen, the collective system gets advanced. And that's the thing. That means, and I thought of saying something to the UN, like I said in one of my earlier talks, where I said, like, the United Nations should just get all the world leaders and get the greatest video game developing companies to make this online multiplayer battlefield. And in some sense, these people replicate exactly in a digital video game the military of all the actual military power of all nations. So when nations want to go into war, nations never need to invest in military budgets. They just play video games. They're like presidents of two countries play video games, and whoever loses the video game can choose if they win or lose. So I'm saying that virtual reality can become the greatest backup system to protect us from war. I would say virtual reality, guys. Virtual reality is like the fire. It's the fire extinguisher for war occurring. Do you know what I mean? In cyberspace, the casualties are non-existent. In real space time, its casualties are real. Do you know how many people who were like, the dude was a baker? The dude was a baker. Think about it. You're baking bread all day. Suddenly they're like, war is happening. You gotta hold a gun and go kill people. And the guy's like, I can bake. They'll be like, all right, you be the chef. And the chef felt like the only person really strangely sheltered from war, but close to it. It's like after the nurses, the chef probably felt the safest. You know what I realized? I realized novelty is the genius, the new. The new always is revolutionary. It's just the spirit of the new, you know? Same, like, imagine a place where a bunch of, like, angry, grumpy people are, and then a sudden silly kid runs in and makes, this silly young kid makes people laugh with a joke or something, you know? We have to realize that the value of life is an inner realm generation, and Mr. Within is telling you your thoughts and stuff, they come and go. That's why there's, in some sense, a different emotional reality, you know. So I'm saying, when you realize there's a tension, you gotta. Here's the thing, guys. The communication is at its healthiest when it has some acknowledgement of the outer realm before the inner realm projects. If we ignore the outer realm, it's like a roof ignoring its ceiling, its pillars, the columns keeping the roof up. You know. Savageness echoes in history. We thought we were diamonds in the dirt, or we thought we were dirt that became a diamond, but we were from the beginning the diamond in the dirt. So, anyways, guys, if there's any questions, please share now, or I think I'm going to be tuning out in a minute. But thanks for the engagement, guys. I'm just trying to develop this community. Anybody who feels like they can contribute to, in some sense, the effort of my projects. This is a community where I'm accessible if anybody wants to communicate or anything. Pretty much anything you write here comes straight to my phone, in my pocket, you know. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. The most important thing is to notice what's there before you were. When you get to that level of alertness, the self-expressive, the need to express self changes from just having a value for you, and I think it becomes more collective. So I feel we are individual objects going through a subjective phase where we're going to become, in some sense, the object of a subject. So what I mean by that is individual objects through the bridge of language, or in some sense communication, are becoming fields. We are realizing the mind is like an ocean, the body is like an iceberg. And it's like what happens when the iceberg melts, where the ocean never always knew, somehow. So, anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings to us.